Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Secular Homeschool Revolution podcast. I am your host, Ashley, and I'm so happy you're spending some time with me today. Whether you're driving, folding laundry, looking at lesson plans, or just taking a moment for yourself, thank you for being here. My podcast is for homeschool parents, especially if you're a part of the BIPOC secular progressive community. All of my episodes are for y'all. Myself, are all about having meaningful and intentional conversations to support your homeschooling journey. Today's episode is very close to my heart. We are going to explore joy being an act of resistance from the BIPOC experience. Specifically, we are going to talk about how to infuse joy into your homeschooling journey. And yes, learning decolonized history is critical, and having conversations about oppression is important. But joy, guys, it is revolutionary. Joy is what sustains us. So this episode is for all the parents out there determined to carve out spaces of resilience, laughter, and happiness in your kids' homeschooling experience. Let's get into it. When you think about homeschooling your kids, one of the first things that comes to mind, at least for me and like my community or my circle of friends, is we have to fill in these gaps that mainstream traditional education left out or left behind. And we feel this need that we need to make sure, and it is important, that they learn an honest but heavy decolonized history and the history of systemic oppression. And we want them to just fully engulf the idea of why representation matters. And when we do that, it can feel like our homeschool experience becomes centered around resistance against the man, against the system, against institutional failings. Okay? But what if I told you that joy is just as critical as resistance? What if we reframed resistance itself as an act of joy? Are y'all with me? Okay, so when, us in these marginalized communities, when we're choosing happiness and we're choosing creativity and choosing exploration, all of that in itself is radical. And I love that for our kids because it's healing. One of my favorite writers, if you ever just need a recommendation, anything by Audre Lorde, you can go back and reread her words and just have a new perspective, a deeper perspective. But check her out if you haven't. One of my favorite quotes by her is, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare." Isn't that incredible that we get to extend that to our kids when we center joy? And when we're protecting their joy, we are nurturing their curiosity and we are allowing them the space to dream and just be their authentic selves. And I think that's part of the revolution too. I don't know. When I don't know how many opportunities they'll ever have in this lifetime where they will be safe to be themselves. And I just get so, like, y'all, I have some quirky kids, but not quirky in a bad way. Just like they are so uninhibited from being, what is cool or what's not cool. Like my 12-year-old is like heavy Percy Jackson. I know I have mixed feelings about Percy Jackson, but we're there. And Percy Jackson's a little too hard. And she asked for a sword, a play sword and a play dagger. And it's just in her room listening to the books, cosplaying it. Now, I think if she went to a traditional school, and this is me assuming, but it might be a little rough for her. But she just finds so much joy and just like her imagination with this book series, and I have a big old overflowing heart around it. Um, but next, let's discuss how do we make sure our homeschooling experience is one that centers joy alongside learning, right? Because, stuff is fun, but we also can have a learning component. So I think kids learn best when they are engaged and having fun, right? And we also are not committed to recreating school at home. That's also important. But when we incorporate play and creativity into our lessons, we are making the learning process more enjoyable. And this allows kids to just explore their interests and talents. And I also think it just helps them develop critical thinking skills and problem solving abilities. We need to make sure we're celebrating diversity in learning materials. Again, because that representation matters, especially in education. And we need to make sure we are using or making a conscious effort to include diverse voices so that our kids have a more well rounded perspective. How do we disrupt the heaviness and integrate revolutionary joy into our day to day homeschooling routine? Um, so, how we can do that is start by asking your kid, what excites you? What are you passionate about? What do you want to learn more? Whether it's an art, science experiment, gardening, or coding, help them connect to things that spark joy. For instance, I know a homeschooling parent who loves drumming, and they've made that a part of their curriculum. It's not as an extra activity, but like integrated it into music, and they do math with rhythm and fractions, and even oral history by tying it into like the African diaspora traditions. Is it diaspora or diasporic? Diasporic. I think it's diasporic traditions. Um, Next, you can create playful narratives of resistance. Not every story about BIPOC communities has to center on tragedy. And I've said this also before. There's still a big area of growth, especially for books centering like black and brown perspectives that are very trauma based. So a lot of times I try to be intentional to make sure the story isn't centered around trauma to share with them. And if it is, like Ghost Boys, we're there to like support the conversation. But we really want to use storytelling to amplify joyful narratives. So, for example, instead of always discussing the hardships, the difficulties of the civil rights movement, introduce kids to like the resilient stories about Ruby Bridges, talk about her life as a grandmother, an activist, a joyful artist, and balance like the hard truths with reminders of people thriving. And I also think that's the disconnect too when allies, white allies especially, are teaching their kids like about Black history, Black culture. They always start with the hard truths instead of the change makers, right? And the positives. And then that, I think that, especially at a young age, skews that perspective. Um, and so be more intentional about showing them the brighter side of things. And so whenever they come across like a situation that might, be a see something, say something, they won't write it off as like, oh, well, that's typical. That's a typical for a Black experience. And we're like, no, why are these people being treated this way? To empower that voice. And it humanizes BIPOC communities as well. Nature walks and connection. So when we reconnect with the land, that also is our own form of resistance. And this is so funny. My kids are not hikers. They do not like being outside like that. So that is an area of growth for my family. One of my friends is what is it? They like camping. And one of these days we're going to make it out there. But we do need to dismantle this notion that nature is a privilege for others, which it's not. We need to take our kids outside to hike, walk, or explore things. Let them know who the indigenous people were with this land. Like, give them access to that information and show them how they lived on the land, how they were thriving. Also, like, spot birds, notice leaves, feel the sun on your skin. I think these small moments of happiness also build resilience. Another thing we can do is focus on community and celebration. Our kids need to see their community thriving, not just surviving, but thriving. Find opportunities for them to connect with other BIPOC homeschoolers and cultural groups. Like I said, I know I see the slander about co-ops and communities, but I'm a very community-based person. I love to lean on community, but also if we're looking at the root of the things, that's very much the center of BIPOC communities, right? Especially like in our ancestry, we thrived in communities. And this is a great opportunity to like celebrate your heritage, and not just on specific holidays, but as a constant thread in your homeschooling life, and cooking cultural dishes, learning different like other dishes cultures eat. Learn songs, dancing, just be inspired by your own cultural traditions as well as others. These are acts of everyday joy that affirm identity. And last but not least, what I want to talk about is modeling joy. We as parents set the tone, and I have to check my program like, oh man, I'm being a grouchy pants today. And that creates a negative experience. And I'm not saying to ignore your authentic feelings, but sometimes, life can feel heavy, or we have so much on our plate, or become overwhelmed, and it, is projected. So we need to make sure that if we're constantly stressed or hyper focused on things, that we realize that so our kid doesn't internalize it. And we need to show them that life isn't just about struggle and frustration. It's about laughter, love, and finding just a million reasons to smile. Because after all, they're worth it. And when we're saying finding these reasons to smile, it could be as simple as sharing a joke during morning lessons. My husband likes to share corny dad jokes. So like every day he introduces a new dad joke, or he'll like randomly text, our kids random dad jokes. And they think that is the funniest thing ever. And then they like to like clown him. But, they clown him, but it's still joy. It's also like pausing for we do it. We pause for like spontaneous dance breaks during the day. Y'all, I've been waiting for my oldest to get over K-pop because, of all of the issues with K-pop. And I think she's leaving it behind. And Kendrick Lamar has been heavy in rotation. So I'm excited about that. But anyway, we are like mustard and like do a dance breakdown. In case y'all needed to hear my version of mustard. But that's been our like, we hit it when that comes on. But I don't know. I hope you guys find some opportunities to create joy in your homeschooling journey and don't center it around just heaviness all the time. Before I close out, I have, one last thing to say. Our kids, especially our Black, Indigenous, people of color kids, they deserve to know their worth beyond their struggles. They deserve to celebrate themselves, their culture, their creativity, and their brilliance. And by centering joy in our homeschooling experience, we teach them resilience in the most beautiful way. We teach them that they are no more than their challenges, more than their historical context. They are just the infinite potential. So make sure or share with me on social media how you are including joy into your homeschooling journey so that can spark ideas for another family. Because at the end of the day, we are trying to build community, increase representation for secular, diverse, inclusive homeschoolers. And what better way to do that than sharing how we do joy in our homeschooling lives? Thank you so much for joining me today on the Secular Homeschool Revolution. I hope this episode has filled you with inspiration and ideas to protect the joy, build joy in your homeschooling journey. Joy is not just fluff. Joy is fuel. So if you love this discussion, don't forget to subscribe to the Secular Homeschool Revolution podcast so you won't miss next week's episode where we will talk about cultivating independent learning habits in your kids. Also, join me on social media. I'm only on Instagram at the moment, so secular_homeschool_revolution. And share the ways you're bringing joy into your homeschooling life. And until next time, keep laughing, keep learning, keep resisting, not just through strength, but through joy. Until next time.